Welcome back to another episode of Illuminating Information, the podcast where we shine a light on the cutting-edge ideas shaping the way we work and innovate. Today, we're diving into one of the biggest questions of the year. How can organizations move beyond simply chatting with AI to actually driving business value with context, intelligence, and action? To explore this, I'm joined by data scientist and AI thought leader, Dr. Kirk Borne. We'll unpack what enterprises often miss about large language models, why agentic systems are the next frontier, and how leaders should think about the future workplace over the next 2 to 5 years. Kirk brings decades of experience from NASA to Booz Allen to his current work advising organizations worldwide. And he's known for connecting technical breakthroughs to practical, real-world impact. So whether you're just testing out AI pilots or trying to push past the hype to ROI, this conversation will help you rethink what's possible. With that, let's jump into the conversation. Kirk, it's great to have you back on the podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. Back in 2023, you discussed generative AI and how enterprises can use it. It's so crazy to think how far we've come since then. And as we begin talking about how AI has moved past simply generating answers.
Yeah, it's great to be here. And yes, the world has changed so much in the AI space.
Yeah. A lot of people use the term LLM almost interchangeably with chatting with information. But from your perspective, why is chatting only scratching the surface of what these models can actually do?
Well, I've heard the expression that these chat bots and chat LLM or whatever you want to call them are basically statistical parrots. So they basically learn how to put words together in a statistically meaningful way. All right. So there's a noun, there's a verb, there's a noun, right? Okay. So they know how to put a sentence together, but they're just parroting information they're finding. Whereas the LLM has a lot more than that. It has all this knowledge, so to speak, encoded in that model. Okay, so how things connect to one another, how things relate to another, how things respond to other things or interact with things, and it's whether it's people or products or whatever. So the LLM has more information, so to speak, connections, and in the same way a brain has many synapses and connections. So it's not just there to parrot facts back to you. It can actually reason in some sense. I'm not saying it's reasoning in the human intelligence sense. I'm not, because some people question whether that's possible, but it's reasoning in the sense that it can find a logical progression of statements besides just say, who was the Queen of England in the 1800s type of question. And so what I think of the thing that's sort of powerful with LLM is that it's not only generating text. So most people are familiar with that aspect of chatting, where they ask a question, they get an answer. So it's understanding text, whether it's voiced or typed, and it's returning text, whether it's voiced or typed. But LLMs can do a lot more. Generative AI specifically can create images, right? So you can ask it to create an image. So basically voice to image, or you can create a video, voice to video, or you can say, look at my data and describe my data. So you can go from data to text. I mean, you got all these different transformations between data, text, voice, image, video, whatever you want to make. So there's so much more power there. And so what I really like about it is the ability to think in a new way of how we do our work. And that is so I'm doing my work. So I ask it like, I ask it a certain question, and the question could have a completely different answer if I'm a lawyer or an astronomer. All right. So I can say, what's the evidence for this? Well, it's going to be a different kind of answer when you ask that question. So we have to think about, well, what's my role? What's my context? What is it that I need to resolve here? I mean, is it a scientific question or something else? And so the LLM has the ability to do that because encoded in not just the words, that statistical parrot is sort of where those words came from. They came out of a particular context. And then when you say, well, tell me the answer to this question as if you were talking to a third grader, or tell me the answer to this as if you're talking to a judge in a courtroom. Okay, so you have a different kind of wording for the exact same answer. So there's the power there that's possible because it takes the facts and maps it onto your context, your voice, and what the question you're asking, as opposed to just give me a bunch of facts. So anyway, I think the power goes beyond what people think LLM is, because I mean, you probably had this experience too. You walk out your front door and you're talking to your neighbor, and the next thing you know, I'm talking about AI with my neighbor. I mean, it didn't used to be that way. But no matter what their background and what their career path is, or whether they're even have a job, they're always asking questions about AI. So it's in the vernacular now, and the most common thing people think of is the chat.
Okay, moving on to the second question. People are often not seeing the value that they expected when applying LLMs and AI to their enterprise search. Surfacing relevant information from massive reservoirs of structured and unstructured data, or sources, like you said, like videos and images, is critical for LLMs to work correctly. Where does this context come in, and why does it matter so much more than just having an answer? So I think that kind of goes into the just not chat text anymore.
Yeah, exactly. I think if we're ever going to think of AI as approaching a real intelligence, and again, I'm not saying it's going to be a being, an intelligent being, but approaching what we would consider like an intelligent source to go to, we're going to have to get past the point of thinking that being able to answer a question is the same as being intelligent, right? So you probably heard this expression before that, someone can be intelligent, but they're not really smart. I mean, so this is the person who might be at a party, and you bring up some subject and they can recite tons of facts, but they're just not getting the point of the conversation, right? So context is very important. So when I first started working with sort of marketing analytics teams, I would hear the expression, content is king. Well, I think context is king personally. Content is right there, but context is very important. So delivering the right information at the right time in the right context. So, for example, let's say you have data that says it's your customer's birthday, right? And so you want to, as a business, you may want to send them birthday greetings or something, and maybe you have some choices, and so you choose sort of the funny little goofy, card, okay, which would make people laugh and appreciate the thought that you sent them the card, But what if that person had just bought something from your company that indicated that maybe there was a death in their family, something that they bought indicated that there was this thing going on in their life. Well, you're not going to send them a goofy birthday card in that circumstance, right? So context is really, in my my mind, is a data world. Context is just other data about your data, right? So we used to call that metadata, right? So metadata, sometimes people just think of sort of the date and time that this thing was created, but it's more than that. What is it used for? It answers the questions who, what, when, where, why, how, right? How was this used? Who used it? Why did they use it? In what context did they use it? When did they use it? All these different variables that say, is this the right answer to your question in the context that you're asking it? Well, in the context, is this data the right data to use, considering the context in which we received it? And so context gives the LLM, the chat, so to speak, a better answer. So sometimes when people get hallucinations or answers that don't really answer their question because they didn't give it the right context. Again, going back to my analogy of the difference between asking for a 3-year-old's perspective on dinosaurs or asking a paleontologist perspective on dinosaurs, right? I mean, you're gonna have to say, okay, what is the context in which you're asking this question? And so I think we bring this extra data through this concept called RAG nowadays. So RAG is this retrieval augmented generation. So you're not just generating something from AI, but you're augmented with other information that you retrieved from your company's knowledge base. So that's the context that surrounds sort of the capture of it, the information it got when it queried the LLMs, and so then the LLMs, the AI that's using the LLM can say, okay, how should I present this back to the user? And that context is really important for that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Going into the next question, that you said before in our initial conversation, talking about getting onto this podcast, that AI isn't really intelligent if it is just repeating facts, which makes learning from experience the real marker of an intelligent AI. How does that go into context, and what is your opinion on that?
Well, learning is really about that feedback loop, right? I mean, again, you can memorize facts, right? And the facts might not fit the answer to that question you're asking, okay? So and they may be wrong. Okay, so you need a feedback loop to know how to do it, right? So one of my grandsons, we'd ask him, does he want like, peas with his dinner? And his answer would be, no, please. Only please means yes. So we worked on that. Okay, so the feedback loop is how we learn language as humans. Feedback loop is how we learn from experience. I mean, I had this expression I learned years ago, which it actually applies to machine learning models because they learn from the error rate. How can you modify the model to improve it so the error rate goes down? So the feedback loops is automatically part of AI, machine learning algorithm, but it's also growing up. We learn from experience. And so there's this expression I heard long ago. It says, "As good judgment comes from experience, and experience comes from bad judgment." So another way to say that is fail fast to learn fast. Okay, so an AI, just deploy it and thinking it's going to work fine without any feedback loop or any modification or error checking or guardrails or ethical control or whatever. If you just think you can run this thing without governance, that's a mistake. Okay. And so we don't want this thing just to come back with facts, but facts that are correct, meaningful, valid in this context, that are ethical in the sense of, is there some bias in there, or are you violating someone's privacy or whatever? I mean, so there's a lot more that learning that has to happen in order to get the correct response, to the request. And so I think what we get from this is that the ability to reason sort of evolves out of this, because an AI can now say, the last time I asked this question, I was corrected, or there's an extra piece of information in that RAG database, we'll call it that the context database that says, look at the context of this fact now. Okay, so yeah, this customer got a discount because that customer, had a problem with our product in the past, and so the company decided to give them a discount on the next product. But that doesn't mean you give that discount to every person who buys that product. Okay, so understanding why did this thing sell for this price last week and it's a different price this week, it has to do with that context. And so you just can't repeat the facts. Like, what do we sell this for? What, why, how, when? I mean, again, all those questions, who, what, when, where, why, that come with giving the right answer in the right context. And so that's where intelligence comes from, is where you're making your decisions based upon all the facts you have, as opposed to just a simple straight answer to a question. Is it okay to drive on the left side of the road? Well, in the UK, it's fine. In the United States, it's not fine.
Yeah. And kind of going into that, everyone is talking about agentic RAG and model context protocols. How does agentic RAG take us beyond retrieval into the systems that not only generate text, but also provide insight and trigger actions?
It goes back to what I was saying about real intelligence uses context. I give a simple examples, so excuse me if they're too simple. But if I'm going out for the day and I look outside and it's a sunny day, and maybe I'll think, okay, good, I don't need to prepare for anything worse. But if I look at the weather report and it says it's going to be horrible rain or storm or something later today, then I better be prepared for that. Okay, so I need more information just that in the instant. Likewise, like a self-driving car. If a self-driving car only has a camera in the front of it, all right, and no cameras on the side or any context, so to speak, it could be a dangerous thing to do, because there might be children playing on the side of the road, but the camera's looking straight ahead. Likewise, if your camera's straight ahead and there's a car in front of you, your car might slam on the brakes, but the car in front of you is moving at the same speed you are. It's just normal driving. You're just following behind another car. It doesn't mean you need to apply your brakes every second. Okay, so that other data gives you the context in which to make a better decision and take the right action in a given moment. And so the way that RAG, okay, again, it's a technical thing, but what's interesting about it is it's basically just, like I said, it's just other data about your data. So the way this crazy deep learning AI stuff works, it takes very complex things like an entire document library, and it creates these things called tokens, right? So these tokens are like very compressed representations of the facts that it's going to retrieve for you. So first of all, I'm not going to go read all 500,000 documents in my document library. Here are the ones that have this particular concept mentioned, or this particular keyword mentioned. Those are the ones I'm going to look at. So what the RAG does is, when you give it this contextual information, the who, what, when, where, why, how, all those extra facts about your data, it encodes them with these same tokens. So then you can query that token database very rapidly. And most people talk about this in terms of a vector database. So it's just a string of tokens, and find me the answer that has this string of tokens in it. Okay, so there might be 3 documents out of the 500,000 where you can find that string. And so now you can get a more intelligent answer to do a better action in response to what the data you're seeing in front of you. And what I find really amusing about this is this vector database. Actually, some colleagues and I thought of this like 20 years ago. We called it query by example. We said, just give me a vector of data points and find me something that's similar to that. So think of all the things like you purchase online, right? Maybe you buy sporting goods and you buy clothes and you like buying books or movies about sporting events. I mean, who knows? So you got this sort of this vector that describes you on all these different categories: books, movies, clothing, activities, work-related stuff, family-related stuff, etc. And so when people buy other products, they say, "Oh, this person is like this other person who bought that book, so we can recommend this book to that person because they have that similarity." And so we were applying this concept to stars and galaxies in the universe because my background in astronomy databases. So we came up with this idea of query by example. Said, I want more of these. Find me more of these. Okay, so the RAG is basically saying, here's the context I'm in. Find me other things that are in this context. And again, context answers all those questions I mentioned earlier. So you basically take a very condensed representation of a lot of complex information, and you can get a rapid answer to both either a person or to an AI agent. The AI agent is doing the same thing you are, except it's being done autonomously by the AI. So it's querying the database. What should I do in this case? The customer is complaining about this product on our phone. Should I bring a human into the conversation, or is there an answer in our database that can answer their question? Is there a resolution that's already been published that I can point them to the article that explains how to fix that problem? I mean, so it can say, you can answer that question more appropriately, take the best next action based upon that context. So the RAG gets us away from just being a fact machine to an intelligent machine. And I think that's really what we want our AI to be: intelligent, and not just spew facts at people.
Yeah. Oh, that's so interesting. I appreciate your analogies. It makes it way more easy to understand. So that's so cool that you were using that in astronomy and now it's being used again.
Well, the weird thing is, I mean, if you want to get technical, it's really like semantic databases, right? So 25 years ago, when I first started teaching university, I actually had a whole course on that topic. And one of the weeks in my course was entirely devoted to semantic databases. And so the example I always gave my student, now this is 20 something years ago now, right? So things have changed since then. But the example I gave to my students, I said, if you went to a search engine and you said, how many cows are there in Texas? All right. So back then, a search engine just basically searched for keywords, right? So it would find websites that had those words: cows, Texas, that kind of thing. It didn't answer the question. It just found websites that had those words. But now with ChatGPT, or any search engine, because every search engine now, the major search engines all have the AI built in now. So you can ask the question and it gives you an answer to the question. Okay. So it realizes you're asking a question. It realizes what it is you're looking for. What is the context? Okay. So I'm looking for cows. I'm looking for the number of cows, and I'm looking for Texas. So it knows how to go find a database that can answer that question. And so my students were always sort of laughing when I gave this. I said, someday this is going to be built into our search engines. And it is. I guess that's I don't know if I had enough foresight or I was just trying to be funny, or just trying to be funny with my students.
We can say that it was great foresight because you just knew. And our next question I can place into that. A lot of big players can dominate the AI conversation with huge marketing budgets like ChatGPT. But when it comes to execution inside real companies, what actually matters most is the real value coming through. We often say that information is a company's most valuable resource, but what does it really take to turn that information into something that improves core business processes?
Well, I like to think of where we are now as those big companies that are producing the tools and algorithms help us to not have to reinvent that, right? Most people don't rebuild their own search engines these days or build their own PCs, right? I mean, so I'm not saying it's just infrastructure, but it's like that. It's sort of the core tools and core algorithms are being built by these big players. So what the value proposition for a smaller company or mid-sized company, whatever size company other than the big player, is what is your value proposition? What is your market? What is your North Star? What is your company focused on? What are you focused on? And then you can build applications that built on those existing tools that somebody else already prepared for you. All right. So if I want to be a plumber, I don't reinvent the pipe wrench. I mean, somebody already invented the pipe wrench, right? Okay. I might have a novel way of using a pipe wrench, like. So there's this recent study that MIT had this study called the State of Generative AI. And it's a really interesting report. People should look at it. It's a 26-page report. It's very readable, but it's got a lot of really interesting stuff in it. And they talked about what companies are being successful and which ones are not. And interestingly, only 5% of the companies interviewed had positive return on investment. Okay, 95% had negative ROI, 5% had positive ROI. So it was a very frightening report in the sense that most 95% implementations of this stuff aren't yet producing value for the company. They're losing money on it right now. But when they talk to the companies that are successful, they find sort of an interesting split. 2/3 of them are buying, not building. Okay, so 1/3 are building the stuff internally, but 2/3 are buying. What do I mean by that? Well, they have strategic partnerships with companies, and these could be smaller companies who, again, they're not the big four or the big five, whatever the number is now, but they're building business specific tools. Okay, some kind of retrieval tool for customer service or for accounting or for purchasing or supply chain or whatever. So these companies that are building business specific types of tools, and so these other companies saying, "Oh, I need one of those." Okay, so I need an AI to do my accounting for me to find anomalies in my business reports before they go to the IRS or something like that. And so they're building strategic partnerships, okay, in the sense that this partnership helps them to be a better company so they can focus on what their value proposition, what their market is, what their customers want. And so again, it's sort of bringing in these things that are already been built by the big companies. And so I think that's where the value works. And so again, this MIT report show that some really are building internally, but 2/3 of those that are successful are building these partnerships to bring it in from the outside. And interesting, there's also the possibility of hybrid build and buy. And in the report, they specifically said they didn't have enough data. They had insufficient data to answer that question. So even in the study itself, they realized they didn't have enough data to answer a question that you might want to ask this report. So to me, it's very meta, right? They're talking about data and knowledge, and well, we don't have enough data to answer our own question. But it's good. It's good that we've realized those gaps are there, and that's where the human steps into the AI, helping to fill the gaps, correct the errors, put those guardrails up to them. And so I think small businesses have the advantage that obviously they know their own business, right? You can't bring in an external partner, all of a sudden they know your business, right? and so that's why it's a partnership. So they know how to build the thing. They know how to integrate the AI with maybe your pipelines, your APIs, your customer databases, your product databases, whatever it is you have. They know how to integrate that stuff, but they don't know your business, right? So if there's an anomaly with something, like customer A normally orders, 1 box of laundry detergent a month, and all of a sudden this other customer orders 100 boxes of laundry detergent every month. You got to realize that other customer is actually running a laundromat. Okay, they're actually running a business that needs that much. Okay, instead of just saying, "Oh, anomaly, it must be wrong." And so having that partnership enables success for these smaller businesses. And by smaller, I mean not the big organizations that are announcing new LLMs every week. Mm-hmm. And there's plenty of those.
Yeah. We've been talking a lot about what AI can really do and where it delivers value. But the big question every leader is asking is, if we invest, will it actually pay off? Kirk, when we come back, I want to ask you about ROI, hype, and what's really ahead for the workplace of the future. Be sure to subscribe to Illuminating Information on your favorite podcast platform. If you have a question, topic you would like us to cover, or know someone who would make a great guest on this podcast, reach out to us on our website and let us know. Stay innovative, stay informed, and as always, keep illuminating information. We'll see you in the next episode.